Well, every year, Canadians lose millions of dollars to scammers. But why and how does this happen? And what can we do to avoid getting caught in a scam? Well, joining me to discuss this further is Corporal Sean Milne, who is part of the RCMP Alberta Provincial Financial Crime Team. Welcome to Bridge City News, Sean. Great to have you on today.
Oh, thank you. Good to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so Sean, how bad is this situation right now? Are fraud scams on the rise? Because it really seems like they are.
Fraud scams, at least in how they're reported, do rise year after year. Statistics from the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre show there's always more victims reporting and more dollars lost. Sometimes that's by virtue of more people reporting, which is what we like. But unfortunately, a lot of it is because more scams are happening.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It seems like it's constantly in the news, another scam, another scam. And I understand too that phishing scams are still one of the top problems out there. Can you maybe explain how these work and what we should do to avoid them?
Well, phishing scams come in a variety of methods. Usually, the most prevalent ones are through email or text message. Phone phishing also happens. Typically, in phishing cases, what they're looking to do is to either solicit personal information from you that they can then go and use in a later scam, or if they have access to technology or your devices through the phish, like if they send you an email or a text, they'll want to direct you to a website they control, where they get you to input your personal information or download an attachment that will install malware on your computer, which will allow them to either harvest your information or put something like ransomware on there that will result in further loss.
Oh, it's so unfortunate. Now, we have a fairly significant senior population in the Lethbridge area. So are seniors at a higher risk?
To some scams, to a certain extent, yes. The scammers don't necessarily discriminate on age. They'll take, unfortunately, anybody. But seniors do often tend to be home more often. They often have more disposable income that they can unfortunately lose if they fall prey to a scam. And sometimes they're not necessarily as up to date on what kind of scams are out there. So that does often, unfortunately, make them an easier target.
Yeah, true. Now, are there any particular scams that are aimed at older individuals?
Emergency scams are something that often are pointed more towards the senior community. They're more commonly known as the grandparent scam, where the scammers will contact the victim and posing as a family member or a family friend who's in some sort of legal or other emergency. And they need that person's help right away, usually in the form of some sort of money that they'll either get the target to send to them, or the more recent trend we see a lot of is the scammers will actually arrange for someone to come pick up the cash from the target. So there's unfortunately a number of ways they can approach that make it more complicated for seniors to avoid.
Right. And then I've also heard of the landline scam, the hang up scam. And a lot of older individuals are the ones, of course, with these landlines.
Yeah, the landline scam where they contact the person and then they claim that they're hanging up and then they just keep the line open and the senior doesn't realize that the call hasn't dropped. And so they re-engage posing as somebody different and the target doesn't know that they're still talking to the scammer, but they have that sense of safety because they thought they hung up and called somebody separate. So that's the prevalence of landlines in that community, yeah, does make that one kind of directly targeted at them.
Definitely. Now, some people report they receive frequent text messages and emails about these opportunities to earn lots of money in a short amount of time by investing in cryptocurrency. So, what do we need to look out for here?
Basically, when it comes to like the messages like that, anything that's unsolicited is automatically a red flag. I actually got a job offer text message just this morning, but it comes out of the blue. It's unexpected, so I'm not going to buy into that. The other sense to watch out for is they'll usually push it as a very urgent thing, like this is a limited time offer or this is your one chance, and so that gets people to think without, to act without thinking, and that's what they rely on to make the scam successful.
Yeah, I know. I've been, targeted in that way as well with the recruitment people or like job opportunities. What are you supposed to do in those cases? Just ignore it?
Usually, just ignore it is the best outcome. They tend to flex a lot to different phone numbers on a regular basis. They're very mobile that way. So just ignore it and carry on with your day is always the good recommendation. We also recommend that you kind of spread awareness of these things. So if you successfully identified it as a scam, just when you're around friends or family, just bring it up in conversation so that other people who might not be aware that this is a scam have some heads up and kind of have some information that they can now be equipped with if they get a similar message.
Right. And of course, romance scams also are quite common. So, what are some of the telltale signs of this type of scam?
Romance scams are often very dangerous because they play a very long game in the romance scam. They'll spend a lot of time investing in that. So there isn't quite that same sense of urgency pushing the victim to act. That most telltale sign of a romance scam is that you will never be able to meet the person. The scammer will make a lot of plans to meet, but there'll always be something that comes up that prevents that. There'll be have a medical emergency or a family emergency or be held up in customs or something like that.
Mm.
So until the point is that you actually meet somebody in person, um, don't be convinced to send anything because all those emergencies they identified, the solution will always be, can you send me some money to help out?
Dangerous, dangerous, and it's so unfortunate. Now, Sean, how do home improvement scams typically play out?
Home improvement scams are a little bit different
Okay.
in that they often have an actual physical local component. So in those cases, it's there's actually someone who comes to the house and they're usually selling something like water purification equipment or air duct cleaning or something that would be useful for a homeowner. And then what happens is that they will engage in a transaction that has a lot of fine print to it. So if you're getting yourself a water softener or a water purifier equipment, they will often sell it as this was a low cost solution to help your house. But the fine print actually shows, for example, that the person may in fact be renting the equipment for an extended period of time for far more than it would actually cost to buy it outright. And once the person is locked into that contract, it can be difficult for them to get out. So there's a lot of pressure to act on those. They exert a lot of pressure on the homeowner, and then the devil's in the details for the fine print and reading into it, and knowing that if anybody's going door to door selling anything in Alberta, they need to be licensed to do that, both by the province and normally by the municipality. So if anybody is coming door to door selling, check that licensing right away. Don't be pressured into acting anything promptly. Take time, do some research, check it out before you sign on the dotted line.
So, these are actually people coming to your door that you're meeting and interacting with in person.
In most cases,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, and so some time ago, the Alberta government actually made it illegal to sell door-to-door energy solutions, like energy efficiency appliances or things like that. So the scammers diverted to other products that aren't technically in that area. So that's where you get the water equipment and things like that.
hmm Now, what about people like calling you on your phone, on your cell phone, and say pretending to be a phone company or something like that? Has that been on the rise as well lately?
Yes, that's also a very prevalent one. Scammers call posing as a phone company. They'll always have a very good deal to offer. And a lot of what they are aiming for in those scams is when you sign up for a phone contract, you provide a lot of personal information. And so they solicit that personal information from the victim as part of the call. They'll get their name, their address, their date of birth, often some credit information because they'll claim they need to run a credit check, but the information they're harvesting there then allows them to commit identity theft later on.
Right. Is there anything, if you have this person on the phone, is there anything you can do or say to them to kind of like trip them up or like catch them in it? Or is it best to just disengage and call police? Or what should we be doing in
Typically,
this
it's
case?
best to disengage.
Yeah.
If some people, as a hobby, do like to kind of play along with the scammers just to waste their time, but generally the advice is always to disengage. And if you have a suspicion that maybe it was a legitimate call, you can always call that company back later and confirm the fact. And the fact is, a real representative, if they are calling you to make a sales pitch, will understand people's concerns, and they'll be okay with you hanging up and calling back because they get that a lot. A scammer won't want you to hang up. A scammer will try to keep you on the line. So yeah, hang up and call them back on a number that you find. Don't call them back on a number that they supply because that'll be a number they control. But find the number your own way and then contact them.
Really good advice there. Thank you for that, Sean. Now, of course, we are in the middle of tax season, so fraudsters often try to impersonate the Canada Revenue Agency. So, what kinds of tactics are they using?
They will Taxes have a kind of a twofold tactic for the scammers. The first is to impersonate Canada Revenue Agency, and that becomes the kind of pressure scams where they'll call and say, "Oh, you have an outstanding tax bill, and if you don't take care of it right away, there's going to be some sort of consequence." And so they create that sense of urgency in the victim, and that's what makes the victim act without thinking. And so then they'll either solicit personal information or get the person to send a payment for their overdue taxes, and they'll often get them to send it in a method that is difficult to trace. So they'll ask the person to pay by gift cards or by cryptocurrency, and those aren't ways that Canada Revenue Agency accepts payment. The other tax angle they like to play is when they put out those phishing scams, they'll say, "Oh, you have a tax return waiting for you that you maybe didn't know of or expect. All you have to do is log into this webpage to collect your tax refund," and they're stealing your personal information in the process.
Oh my goodness, scary. Okay, so Sean, if an individual has discovered that they have been scammed, do they report it? Who do they call? What should they do?
We always ask that people report it to police. We can't try to solve a crime if nobody tells us about the crime. Though, on that note, we also don't mind people calling to check things out either. We're also happy to prevent a crime. So, if someone is in a situation where they think it might be a scam, by all means, call your local police and ask them about some information on it. We can supply a lot of that. Beyond reporting it to police, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre is a big partner for police agencies nationwide who gather a lot of data on frauds and how they work, and use that to create tools that we can use to combat it. So we also encourage people to report it through the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, which they can do by phone or online.
Okay, great advice there. Now, is there any way to recover your stolen money if you have been victimized in this way?
Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, there's very little chance that we will be able to get money back. The scammers do understand how the system works, and so they do work to convert your money into ways that we can't get back as soon as possible. So they will convert it to cryptocurrency, or they will move it out of Canada and move it to other countries. Many of those countries which aren't necessarily very cooperative with Canadian police investigations, and so they move very quickly to move it beyond reach if they can.
Yeah, you would think there would be a money trail, especially if things are done online, or, I mean, how easy is it to catch these people?
Often there is a trail. The issue is just how fast we can follow that trail. So the scammers can move it very quickly, but in terms of the tools and what we have to go through to follow that trail, that doesn't move as quickly as they do. And once it does move, as I say, overseas or out of Canada, we start to hit barriers where it's beyond our investigative reach because the countries, often in some cases, aren't cooperative with our attempts to investigate.
hmm Now, we've talked about all different kinds of scams, from home improvement scams to telephone company. What other kinds of online purchase scams should we be on the lookout for?
There's a number of online purchase scams. The marketplace scams are always very prevalent when they are selling items on Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace or other ones that
Right.
simply don't exist. In those cases, they will often use that advertisement to solicit a deposit from the interested buyer. So they will put, say, a truck up for sale that's at a very good price that attracts lots of interest. But the scammer will tell the person, "Well, I've had a lot of interest in this truck. I need you to send a deposit to prove that you're actually serious about this." And so the person isn't necessarily willing to spend all that money up front without seeing the product, but sending a deposit makes sense in some way. So people will send the deposit, and after that, the person cuts off all contact. And they do this for all sorts of products. They do it for vehicles or for puppies. We've had numerous media releases about hay sales where they're targeting farmers with hay that doesn't exist. I've seen them advertising air conditioners during a heat wave because they know people are desperate to find some. So they keep on top of the trends and they build their tactics accordingly.
Smart criminals. Hopefully not too smart for you guys, though.
What We do catch our fair share, yes.
Yeah. What about Ponzi or pyramid schemes? I mean, that's been going on for decades, it seems. So is there any way to recognize these?
For Ponzi pyramid schemes, they're often operating as an investment situation, where it's an investment opportunity that doesn't really exist out in the wider world. It's a very, very limited opportunity, very special knowledge. But if you get in now, you can make a lot of money. Any sort of investment that a person is contemplating making, they need to do a lot of research. But the best direction we can point people in that case is to the Alberta Securities Commission. They maintain lists of registered, legally qualified investment brokers and lots of advice on how to avoid investment scams. And so you have that chance to double check whether this is a legitimate opportunity. Anytime the opportunity is being presented as, oh, it's overseas or it's out of Canada, so that Alberta Securities Commission thing doesn't apply, that's a very big red flag. You want to make sure that whoever you're investing with is subject to Canadian regulations and law.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, well, we are out of time here, but really quickly, any final reminders for our viewers on how to sniff out a scam? Basically, if it's too good to be true, then don't go for it.
Yeah, there's the two biggest things we like to point out for a lot of scams is the scammers create a sense of urgency and secrecy because they don't want to give you time to double check. They want you to act fast before you have a chance to check on the opportunity, and they don't want you to talk to other people who might clue you in that this is a scam. So they'll want you to keep it under your hat until they have had a chance to actually take your money. So anytime someone's pushing you to act quickly and to not tell anybody about it, those are two very big red flags.
Amazing. Thanks so much for being with us today. Appreciate your time, Sean.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Corporal Sean Milne is part of the RCMP Alberta Provincial Financial Crime Team.